If you've been following along in this chapter, you'll notice that we've made specific improvements to a number of images using the controls to simply fix a specific problem. More often than not, though, when we're making our images look better, it's a combination of many of these sliders that will improve the image dramatically. So the first thing that I want to do with this image is move over to the Lens Correction panel, and in the Profile tab, I'll enable the lens profile corrections. Then I'll move to Color, remove the chromatic aberration, and finally choose Manual, and then select from the various upright modes. Then, if I want to crop the image, I'll tap the C key in order to select it, or click and hold on the crop tool in order to select a specific aspect ratio. In this case, I'm going to stick with 2:3, and then click and drag out my crop marquee. If I need to reposition it, I can do so by clicking inside of the crop marquee and then repositioning it. I'll tap Return or Enter in order to apply that crop. If I want to set the white balance, I can either return back to the basic panel, or I could tap the I key or select the white balance tool. Then I'll click in my image in an area that I think should be neutral. I can always adjust that by moving the temperature or the tint slider. I'm going to toggle on both my shadow clipping warnings as well as my highlight clipping warnings, and I can do that by either clicking on them or tapping U for underexposed and O for overexposed. This way I can check and make sure that I'm not clipping any areas of my image to pure black or pure white. I can see on my histogram that although I have a pure black in my image, I don't quite have a pure white. So I'll use the keyboard shortcut Shift, double click on the white slider in order to set my white point. This shortcut also works on my black slider. I could hold down the Shift key and double click on the slider in order to set my black point. But you'll notice that it has clipped a little bit of my image right here in this door. So I'm going to manually move the black slider over to the right until I no longer see the blue overlay. Then to toggle off the highlight and shadow clipping warnings, I'll tap the U key and the O key again. To recover a little bit of information in my highlight area, I'll drag my highlight slider down to the left, and to lighten the shadow area, I'll drag my shadow slider over to the right. Now the image is looking a little bit flat, so I'll add a little bit of contrast, and I'll also add a little bit of clarity to add that mid-tone sharpening that's going to make the image pop. I'm also going to decrease the vibrance in this image a little bit to just make it look a little bit more aged. Now at this point, don't forget, because all of the changes that I've made are completely non-destructive, I can go back in and change anything else that needs to be refined. So in this case, I might just change the tint slider by dragging it over a little bit to the left because I was seeing a little bit too much magenta in my image. If I wanted to bring up the saturation in just one of the color ranges, I could switch over to the HSL Grayscale panel and select saturation and then move one of the different sliders, or I could use my targeted adjustment tool set to saturation to do the same thing by clicking anywhere on my image in the color that I want to change and dragging to the right in order to increase the saturation, or dragging to the left in order to decrease it. In this case, I'm going to click and drag to the right just to increase the saturation in my oranges and yellows. Finally, I'll move over to the Detail panel, but before I start sharpening the image, I'll want to make sure that I'm zoomed into 100%, so I'll use Command Option 0 and then hold down the spacebar in order to move over to an area to be sure that I can see the amount of sharpening that I'm adding. I'll go ahead and increase the amount of sharpening just a little bit, and also the radius, but making sure that I'm not seeing any halos around the areas of high contrast. If I wanted to suppress the sharpening in those flatter areas, the areas that have less edge contrast, then I would choose the Detail panel and I would slide it over a little bit to the left. Now, if I want to preview just the sharpening to make sure that I'm not overdoing it, I can use the keyboard shortcut Command Option P to show just the changes that I've made in the detail panel. They're off right now, so I'll hold down Command Option again and tap the P in order to show those changes. Once I'm sure that I'm not overdoing it, I'll go ahead and zoom back out using Command 0 so that I can see the entire image. And then I can tap the Q key if I want to see a before and after on the left and the right-hand side. I'll tap the Q key again to see the final image. And there you have it. Within minutes, we can apply a number of simple but non-destructive adjustments in Camera Raw to really help our images stand out.